Who's afraid of SPC alarms? If your team has stopped trusting those signals, you're not alone. When false alarms take over, teams stop responding and real problems slip by. As we have all learned, an SPC chart can help us identify special cause variation from common cause variation. It's great for that. Now, here's something I've learned about our operators, our team members. They develop a certain, let's call it a zen for their process. They work with it every single day of their careers. Sometimes when they see a point out of control, they're as freaked out as you would think they should be. And there are sometimes legitimate reasons for this behavior. Now, if the limits are calculated incorrectly, they know that they are overreacting if they actually react. They know they will make the process worse. They will respond in their comments, wait until the next subgroup. Now, in SPC theory, if limits are correctly calculated, this is absolutely the wrong reaction. Something has occurred and you should be investigating. Yet, lo and behold, the next data point arrives and it's comfortably inside the limits. So if you have a cultural problem with your team members responding, the first thing to do, check your limits. Are they statistically based? Beyond that, there's another insidious problem. If you've worked in manufacturing for any length of time, you are aware that gremlins exist. Gremlins magically appear and just as quickly magically disappear without a trace. I had a well-known and highly regarded Lean Six Sigma company that was one of my customers. They said, we're lucky if we can identify 20% of the root causes for these signals. Stuff happens. Now, let's say the limits are legitimate. Team members on the floor that have been on that process for a while know it's a gremlin versus it's real. You can talk about statistical control all you want, but if you take a new point, it'll be good. They see a bigger picture than we do. Now, when that next data point is bad, now we start investigating. Ideally, the team members taking the observation should be investigating. But unless you're shutting the process down because that's the right thing to do for the customer and for the business, you don't have time to chase that down. So now it's left to the engineer. And if that out of control point occurs at 11 p.m. that night, it's gone by the time the engineer comes in for their morning coffee. So what to do? Just give up? No. I was serving as a master black belt for one of my employers, and I had black belts at each plant. At a corporate level, we were looking at how many open alarms there were for each shift not addressed with comments, not the actual number of alarms that the plants were generating. As I started digging into this one plant, I found that over 60% of all data points taken were alarming as out of control. Now just think about that. 3 out of every 5 data points generates an alarm for each machine of every process. If I'm responsible for 10 machines, somebody is crying wolf constantly. Even though they were acknowledging the event, the comments were bogus. They don't have time for that. They stopped looking at the charts for real clues. That, my friends, is a dangerous culture. So, same company I spoke about earlier, highly regarded in the Lean Six Sigma space. When we interacted years before, their expected number of alarms was around 5% or 1 in 20 observations. Since they told me that, I have found throughout my lifetime 5% or 1 in 20 observations is a great rule of thumb. Look at an SPC chart for the last 25 subgroups. If I see one out of control, Great. Stuff happens. The point went out of control. They responded to it. Maybe they didn't. And then it's back in control. It's doing exactly what it is intended to do. You are taught in SPC class to freak out. You learn in the real world reasonable. Now, do you want that? Of course not. But stuff happens. On an FMEA, the RPN for that event falls way below 100. You make a risk-based decision to just deal with it. Now, going back to this plant that had 60% of alarms, they had a bunch of Western Electric rules turned on. I got rid of most of them. There were a handful that actually were helpful. We kept those. I then went back and recalculated limits. That got rid of a bunch more alarms. And then I found a couple of examples where they were using specification limits versus control limits. I got rid of those alarms. And by the time I was done, they went from over 60% down to about 8%. I simplified the comments and how they had to enter in so that there were less clicks and more meaningful clicks. Then alarms were treated as no kidding alarms. Go investigate. Now, all of this was communicated to all of the employees on the floor. Management will get their act together first before we ever hold you to a standard. And when we actually did that, they appreciated that somebody actually fixed a huge thorn in their paw. Ultimately, I adopted a new metric for me, the corporate level, and that was targeting at a 5% alarm rate. And what I found in the following year was root cause identification actually increased from almost zero to something a little more realistic. Now, on the other side, I found two of my plants with less than a half of a percent alarms. Your thought, wow, they got it going on. They are super in control. Nope, stuff happens everywhere, around 5% of the time. And it turns out that all of their limits were non-statistical. So we put on statistical limits. Now, why were the original limits so wide? For many of the characteristics of this product, we were highly capable. The customer didn't care about that variation. So we put in take action alarms separate from SPC alarms and detailed the proper reaction to take. 5%. It's a great rule of thumb. It works. So be careful out there. The streets are messy and so is data. But remember, there is always a way.